You're watching Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events.
We're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan Act funds and what we are doing, what we plan to do with these funds, and we have, you will find two better public servants than what we have here today. We have with us today Brian Ficata, the Community Development Specialist in Lacrosse County, and Julie Emsley, Economic Development Administrator for the City of Lacrosse. So, ARPA funds, $1.2 billion to cities in Wisconsin, $1.1 billion to counties, doled out county by county, city by city. What is our plan in regard to investing these dollars to maximize the impact we would have on society? And I guess we're closest to Brian. We'll start with you.
Sure, thank you. So obviously, I'm fortunate to work for the county board here in Lacrosse County. The county board has done a really nice job of recognizing that these are one-time funds. This is an incredible opportunity to have a long-term impact on our community. And so we've been strategizing. We've been trying to figure out where are the best places to invest those funds. Again, to have that long-term impact on our communities, and you know, fortunately, we've been involved in this child care discussion for a long time. Actually, since Chris and the Seven Rivers Alliance, I used to serve on that board at the time that we were going through that workforce innovation plan, and I've been engaged in the conversation about child care since then, and just trying to figure out what are the right solutions. Recognizing there's no silver bullet solution, that we're going to have to chip away at this issue, you know, with a variety of different projects, a variety of different strategies. And so we've been able to engage the county board in that discussion through this ARPA process, and they have at this point reserved $3.3 million for child care neighborhood development. And so that's kind of where we've started the conversation, and we're working on a proposal now.
Julie, how about the city?
So just to kind of give some background on where the city's at. So the city will receive in total about just shy of $22 million for our ARPA allocation. And so how we kind of got where we are today. So just first of all, of course, like all federal funds, there's some restrictions around how we need to use these funds and what's the spirit of what needs to be done with them. So that, of course, was something that's always been in the background of making sure that we're using it as it's intended, and also, you know, that it's in line with the requirements. With that, also, we starting back last summer when we first knew we were getting this money, we had a public input process. So always had a public input portal on our website encouraging everyone from the community to let us know what they thought we should use these funds for. We've received hundreds of suggestions. I'm looking at the mayor nodding his head, because not just through our public input portal, lots of phone calls and emails, lots of ideas on how we should use these funds. We had a council planning session as well last fall for council, our leadership, also to kind of give input on what should be done and what we want to see with our community, asking some of those big questions of what's the best things about our community, what do we love about Lacrosse, what would we want to have changed, what's the opportunities, and then also just the awareness of the work of what's going on with ARPA in general, not just in our community, but in other communities, in the state, at the county, at the federal level, and just understanding the pandemic as we are living in a very volatile and dynamic environment. And then just work we already had underway with the city. So we knew, as Brian said, we've been at the table of childcare for some time. We've done a lot of planning. Just as one example, our Community Development Block Grant program does a 5-year plan, and childcare was something that we had already identified before the pandemic that it was an issue that the city needed to invest in, and financially. So we put all of those pieces together, and political processes to get money allocated are not always, you know, it's can be a little bit of an undertaking to come together as a community when you have all these folks, whether it's our community members or council members and all of that. And so we did our best to, I wish I could say, and then there was this just formula we put into a computer and it just spit out and said, here, and everybody was like, oh, I get it, and that's why we should put these dollars towards this. Really, it was a juggling act of putting together and us deciding what are our big priorities, what's the purpose of this money, how can we make the biggest impact, what are our greatest needs. So with that, in January, our council passed a resolution to allocate the remaining ARPA dollars. At that point, we had carved off about $4 million for just other things. We did $2 million to go to local nonprofits, some PPE for our police force and things like that. So with the remaining dollars, our council made a decision. They passed a resolution that would allocate a portion of the remaining dollars that we had for ARPA towards 4 main categories, and one of those was childcare. And then in March, last month, I was one of the key staff person trying to figure out how to do this, because as part of that resolution, we had to come back to the council again and have every project and program approved again by them. And so you're thinking, how do we be nimble? How do we respond to this? How do we bring 13 people along on this very dynamic issue that's changing every day? How do you make that happen without having 10-hour council sessions? And I was just really working on the childcare issue. So one of the things we kind of cooked up as staff was saying, okay, we want to have this as a public process. We want public input. We've identified these issues. We kind of knew at that point, because when the council passed the resolution in January, that we were looking at about $2 million for childcare is what was going to be allocated. So how do we move forward and be responsive and nimble to the need, while every day we're hearing of new things that are happening? Because as I think it was Ruth who mentioned, we're lucky enough now that everybody's kind of coming to the table and realizing we need to do something about this. And so as a city, one of the things we thought is we have, I think, something like 54 governing boards, a lot. And so, we thought, we have these governing boards. Let's bring along a targeted group that's already working on these issues so they can stay informed, and us as staff can work with them. Those are public meetings. Folks can still be engaged, and we can do targeted work. And so with the council resolution in March, we did each of those projects. We essentially identified the committees that were already tuned in. So for this one, we decided on the Economic Development Commission to be the group that would be overseeing essentially these projects. That being said, they'll still have to go back through council for approval. But that was just helpful for me, because I as we try to work through this, these are so complex and nuanced. So it was good to have a group that you can bring along, and also oversight. So because I don't think we either want it, as much as part of you as staff, to be on between me and you and everybody who's listening, you want to be like, can you just tell us we can just spend the money and be done with it and not have to come back again? Because then we could just do the work. But at the same time, that's a lot of pressure, right? So you want oversight. You want folks that are gonna give advisement, but you want them to be educated on the issue too. So that's how we got to where we are. And so again, we're looking at about just a little over $2 million. We've already allocated. We've already pushed forward with a project, a $85,000 project for a Child Care Explorers program that was done earlier. But now we have a remaining 1.97 million that we're going to be spending out.
Brian, lack of child care is an ongoing issue. ARPA dollars are one time. How do we make that mesh? How are we expending our dollars at the county level to try to address an ongoing issue, one-time money?
That's the really important question about the use of ARPA funds. They're one-time funds, and so what we've been trying to do is focus on using those one-time funds to build long-term sustainable partnerships, and to really try to find any operational efficiencies that might exist that are ultimately going to help with building a sustainable model for childcare and early childhood education moving forward. And so, we've been fortunate to again be involved in these discussions for many years, and a couple of the projects that we started that we've been involved with We were fortunate to be a part of the University Year program through UW-Madison, and it actually engaged some UW students in doing some research for us in looking at. We most recently worked with a cost-benefit analysis class at UW-Madison that looked at how the county could invest funds in a variety of different ways to impact this industry. They looked at incentives for business cooperative model. We had actually, through a former Competitive Wisconsin forum, had learned about the Energy Capital Cooperative in North Dakota, had looked at that model and really trying to engage businesses in the long-term partnerships that will build sustainable futures for early childhood education. So they looked at that for us. They looked at the county just providing childcare for our employees and how we would potentially invest in that model of again adding new childcare spots within the county. And then they looked at subsidies for childcare worker wages, which obviously, as we recognize, is the biggest challenge facing the industry, is really trying to get those wages, as Ruth talked about, get those wages to a competitive and just what they should be, quite frankly. And so they ran that through some analysis. They found that really, all of those investments yielded a negative net benefit. And so now obviously, equity implications are very hard to measure. And so, we took that with a bit of a grain of salt, but took the recommendations where the county to best invest dollars and maximize that return on investment. A couple of recommendations to try to maximize that benefit would be to focus on serving low to moderate income families and to maximize those operational efficiencies. And so, as we know through working with our partners at the Parenting Place and other organizations, we don't have enough Young Star rated facilities for Wisconsin Shares eligible families. And so what happens with that is if a Shares eligible family is not able to secure a Young Star rated and a quality spot, then they can't access shares. And that leaves them having to pay for childcare in another way. And so we're really, we're trying to focus on creating more spots that have those ratings that are targeted at those families and really providing the care that those families need moving forward. And so the other thing that we had been a part of was the Lacrosse Preschool project, really looking at a neighborhood-based model. They studied the Tangelo Park model down in the Orlando area that was philanthropic-led, but it was neighborhood-based. It was targeting low to moderate income families, and it was a way to stabilize school districts, stabilize schools, and then really, as Dennis said previously, it was, it's that from 0 to 8 you're learning to read, and beyond that you're reading to learn. And so getting kids in those neighborhoods the early childhood education that they need to really be ready to learn. And so that's been a big focus of ours as well. And so right now we're looking at a pilot program with the school district of Lacrosse. This proposal would really truly be a pilot program. It's a program. It would use about a quarter of the funding that's been set aside, but it would be working with the school district to convert a couple of classrooms to provide care for kids between 6 weeks and 4 years. Half those spots that would be created, they're looking at 60 spots total, so this isn't going to be the be-all end-all solution to this, but as I said, really more of a pilot project. That half the spots would be for school district employee families, half the spots would be for Wisconsin Shares eligible families within the neighborhoods, and the benefits of that is that it would take advantage of existing capacities that the district has. The county funding would be used to make those one-time modifications and renovations to the space to be able to be able to use classroom spaces within the schools to offer childcare to those populations. And the interesting piece to it is that it would, again, be one-time expenditures to do that. So it's a match for the source of the funds. But then the school district is also working on their early childhood educational training programs within their high schools that would start to address some of the staffing capacity issues. And so through credentialing within the high schools, they would have students that would actually be able to work within the child care operations, not just this one, but others, and would actually be able to do that through high school while they're actually going to high school and then planning for a career in the industry. And so that was also the other, again, building long-term solutions, long-term partnerships, using the one-time funds in strategic ways.
So, Brian, are some of the funds from the county being used to subsidize individuals so they can pay for childcare, or the facilities themselves to provide a slot?
Yeah, good question. So the primary use of the county funds would be the facility upgrades to make it to make the classrooms able to be used for this purpose. And then what we've talked about with the school district is we would have operational subsidy for those first couple of years, again in a pilot fashion, to just kind of see how the revenue streams come in. Again, we wouldn't subsidize the school district employee child care expenses, but if there was a way that we could subsidize the Wisconsin Shares eligible families' child care expenditures, again, more a model that would guarantee a break even for the district as they take this on over the first couple of years of operations, and then the district has been talking about trying to do private fundraising, establishing a fund that would carry that forward. But really, we're in the phase of trying to prove concept, and so that's what we're working on.
So, Julie, here in Lacrosse, I think you are looked at by the entire state as having something special going on here. The city and the county have a good relationship. You have a vibrant downtown area. You have a great business community. Having graduated from UW Lacrosse, we affectionately call it the Harvard of the Midwest. You have the university here. Is there a magic recipe that we can put together that can address these social challenges? Tops on the list, childcare?
My first thought, just a little bit about my background. Some of you know this, but I actually moved here. My family moved here from Alaska almost 6 years ago, and we were on a nationwide search where we would land, and we landed here, and we've never looked back. I'm originally from the Midwest, but one of the things every time, and my husband and I have lived. This is going to be my just little public thing for Lacrosse, but just this region. But my husband and I have lived all over. We've lived overseas in different parts of the country, and my husband especially is kind of a wild spirit. And every once in a while, I'll be like, "Are we cool here? Like, are we still feeling good about being here?" And one of the things that he says is, he's like, "I just can't think of a better place to raise our family, like our kids." And so I can just say too, I notice I don't think we have parents on the list too as part of the experts that should be represented today. But I have a 4, 6, and 8-year-old. And I've been a full-time working mom the whole time, and so this is a real issue for me in a number of ways. And I just think one of the things about our community too, there's a lot of pieces of this of working together, and the thing that I feel here is that there is that sense of family and community and trying to take care of each other. I don't want to, it's not Pleasantville. I can tell you that too. But part of these pieces too, I think we do have a good relationship. Like, I don't feel like, it's like we all do better when we all do better, sort of thing. And so I feel like I've had that relationship. There's a lot of trust. Brian and I'm relatively new to my position with the city, but I know, like, I worked with Brian before that, and so even when there's things where I'm like, what did the county just do? I know, like, it's always like, well, we're all like going towards the same goals, right? And trying to get there, and that definitely helps. One of the things too, I think on that note that I would say is that for some of our next steps too, at least with the city, is that we have a lot of moving parts, and we're trying to move forward. And as we try to get to the next steps, we're more looking at this different than a little bit with the county of like maybe carving off pieces. We have to spend this money out for sure by 2026, and we have to know what we're doing with it fully by 2024. But again, it's a very dynamic, the end of 2024, it's a very dynamic environment. But we know one of the critical next steps for us too, because we've been so focused on the political process too, and this is a reminder to me too, I'm looking at Jody from the parenting place, of connecting with the child care providers as well. And so one of the things too, I will say myself, I've had my head down so much and trying to get this money focused because there's so many people trying to get there. And childcare workers, and they're a marginalized group as well. And so it's something where we don't want this to be something where those of us are behind the scenes, coming up, cooking up all the answers to what needs to happen and not bringing them to the table in some capacity. And so it kind of reminds me of that same thing of whatever privileged people trying to figure out how we help low income or people of color and not bringing those people to the table at any point and saying, hey, where are you at in this? It can be hard to get a lot of cooks in the kitchen. That has its own challenges, right? But that's going to be one of our next immediate, in fact, that's the next immediate step for us is to connect with the workers in our community. And I get phone calls. I was just on the phone yesterday with somebody who was talking about the workforce issue. And that, to me, too, is the main pain point. And then I just would this kind of folds into a little bit of, I guess, how I think about it. And it's not just me, but it's just the people, like the right people show up at the right time to make things happen. And community development is my background. And one of the things I've learned is it's amazing what one champion can do for a project. And so we just have some really good champions in our community. So whether it's Chris, Brian, the mayor, we have just some people that are showing up. And so I think that's one of the things that brings us together, I think, at the city.
We got a few minutes left in this portion for questions from the audience.
This online question was, what are the wages and plans for staffing for the lacrosse endeavor? To be honest, we haven't really gotten there yet. We're still talking with the school district, working out some of the details of that plan. I know Dr. Engel is also here with us from the school district, and we're really just trying to figure out, is that a contracted with an existing provider, or is that school district employees? And those are some of the discussions and decisions that have yet to be made. And so, the details, while we've roughed out a financial plan for what this would look like, those details haven't been determined yet. So I wouldn't feel comfortable, saying a wage, because it's really not there yet.
So, Brian, this question's for you. I'm just trying to get a sense of the use, when you talk about subsidy and kids on subsidy, the families that are receiving subsidy, and that you're going to subsidize that, if I heard it correctly. Are you saying that your plan would be in these slots, for instance, in these additional, I don't know if you said 30 or 60 slots, that you would be covering then the parent pay portion of it, as opposed to, you're not talking about paying the whole cost of it? And I'm just curious about your use of that, what that means. And then additionally, if that is a model you're going to do, is that something that you could extend with this revenue to other programs in the community that might want to participate in something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. So what we've talked about with the district is that we want to make sure that those spots are set aside for families that are eligible for Wisconsin Shares. And so that would require them to apply and actually take advantage of the Wisconsin Shares program, bring those revenues in. We would expect the family to pay what they can, which is essentially the formula that Wisconsin Shares would is supposed to determine. What I think we're nervous about is that those revenue collections from the families and that sort of thing. And so we've talked about this as being more of a guarantee of getting the district to a break-even point. And so as we get into it, we'll see where the revenues lie. And so the shares, contributions will come in, the families will make their payments. If families struggle with making those payments, then that's where the subsidy would come in, would be making sure that the district is made whole on what they've invested in the program. And to address the second part of your question, it's very much a pilot program. As I said, it would use about a quarter of what we've set aside for the ARPA. And so we would like to kind of see how that goes. We'll be talking with other school districts, other employers, other potential partnerships. Again, this is about establishing long-term partnerships that are going to be able to carry that program and those childcare spots forward beyond when we run out of ARPA funds, or we can no longer have those ARPA funds to draw on. Will the county stay at the table? Heck yes. I mean, we're going to try to identify where we can play a role beyond ARPA funding, but at the same time, understanding this short-term window that we have to use ARPA funding, and trying to figure out how to use those in the most strategic ways to build those long-term partnerships. And so that's the work that's ahead of us.
So I guess my question that I have, so I'm a child care director. I don't want to take too much time because I might think I'm on the next panel. But a little bit about my organization. We've been around since 1954. So you're talking about sustainability, we've done it. We are a 4-star center, so we're quality rated. We have 35 spaces in our center alone that we cannot fill because of staffing shortages. So I heard about the pilot program at the school district of Lacrosse, and we are a 4K partner. We have a really strong relationship with the school district of Lacrosse, but they're looking to open it in Hinchin Elementary, which is 2 miles from my center. So my question, and maybe it's more of a council question, is why spend all that dollars to renovate when there's already existing programs that have those spaces available that you don't have to renovate, buy new materials for? Because early childhood quality materials, books, furniture, it's expensive. That's probably where a lot of that money is just going. And instead of spending that money on materials, is there a way to better look at that money and partner with the programs that are already out there that are struggling to find those staff? If those staff are available, there's those spaces that would already be there. So those 30 spaces that would be open to the community at Hinchin Elementary could, in essence, be at Cooley without having to spend those dollars. And I'm not just talking about Cooley, but Sprouts at the Table, they're on the south side. Kids at Play is on the south side. There's a lot of us on the south side, especially, that have those spaces available. So I guess my plea is really looking at those ARPA dollars and looking at how can we stretch those to the best capacity for our community.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's an important point. I think what we've talked about is trying to find those operational efficiencies as well, and that's where a partnership with the school district makes sense. Is they have the facilities staff, they have the food service, they have those sorts of things that can lend operational efficiencies to the operation as well. And so again, it's about forging those long-term partnerships, bringing new revenue streams and new players into the market, because while the existing providers are doing incredible work, without new revenue streams, it's just not working. It's a broken economic model, and so we need to establish those partnerships with new revenue streams and new sources of funding to come in, because as much as we've talked about trying to subsidize wages for existing workers to get more workers into the field, I absolutely agree that needs to be a top priority. the challenge with that is that when you match that with ARPA funding, what do we do after 3 years? What do we do after 2 years? When those ARPA funds run out and we've used those funds to subsidize wages for existing childcare providers, what happens in year 4? And now, do those wages have to go back to, what they're making now? And that's going to completely gut the industry, because nobody's going to go from making $19 an hour and 3 years from now say, all right, well, sorry, we ran out of that one-time funding source to do this. Now you're going to have to go back to making $12 an hour. Nobody's going to stay. And so we're nervous about that, as well as I know, I completely agree that wages are the number one issue, but without forging new partnerships and new revenue streams, it's not a long-term solution.
So one final quick question, just real briefly. Is the existence of ARPA funds to the city and the county encouraging the private sector to step up and join you in addressing childcare, or is the private sector saying, city, county, you have public ARPA funds, I guess you don't need our help? Which is it more of?
It's a good question. I think it's a mix. I don't, whether it's more of one way or the other. I think we've been successful at engaging private sector partners in the discussions. It's been hard to get private sector, the employers, the businesses, into the discussion to bring funding to the table. And so, now that there is funding there, that maybe takes a little bit of the pressure off. So, that's working, a little bit against us. But I think continuing to drive home the point that these are one-time funds, we need to forge long-term partnerships.
Julie?
Yeah, and I would say that I think there's this, we are reaching this reckoning, and I think more and more people are coming to the table. And to me, and this is just my own self, when I think about how do we make these funds sustainable, part of that is doing what we can over these next 4 years or what have you to help everybody understand, using Brian's term, that we are all customers of childcare in this community. It is not just a parent and child care worker issue and an employer issue, that it is something that impacts our larger community. So as much as we can, I know that some of the things that we've been talking about is we can raise the awareness around that for the community. Because to me, and I'm speaking, I guess, more as Julie Emsley, the individual, not necessarily on behalf of the city of Lacrosse, but until we have a societal shift on that and understand that, we are just going to be spinning our wheels, because there is no one time. We could use our whole $22 million of the city to try to impact change. But until we all understand, and my kids too are at the age now, like my youngest is in pre-K, so my biggest pain points of childcare are behind me, the cost and whatnot. And I would just say, kind of wrapping into this, on a personal note, so I can talk about it as a parent who was paying double my mortgage literally at the height of our childcare, and my husband and I are both quote unquote highly employable, have master's degrees, and had supportive employers, and we just had to grit our teeth and hope that we would get through it, and sometime the ship would get righted. And we would look at each other some days and we were like, how do people who do not have what we have, how in the world do they do this? And so with that, another just last piece that I'm just adding in here, my kids, they're very young still, but they are beautiful and well-adjusted children. Let's hope they stay that way, right? And every time I get a compliment from people on my kids, and they still, trust me, they drive me crazy, so they still have a lot of work. But I just know that the reason that they're that way is because of the mostly women, but that were in their life that cared for them outside. So my husband and I had a role in that, sure. But I would communicate that, it's to call them childcare workers, even to me, they were our family. And my kids would come home all the time and do things that I'm I didn't teach them that. My 4-year-old takes off his shoes every time he gets anywhere. I didn't teach him that. They're practicing breathing techniques when they're angry, and I'm good idea. Well, tell me more about that. So I just, these folks that are in this, that are doing this important work is just, it's so important. And to me, I can talk all day. I'm an economic development administrator. That's what I can do. I can talk about the impact on our economy and our workforce. But where does the economic development and community development stop and start? We don't know. But I just know that the effect of like the importance of this work on our kids, which I think are the most important asset in the community, like any community or society had, that ripples out. And so what these people do to nurture that affects our culture, who we are as a community and a society. And so I think we have to value that. So to answer your question, I think people are understanding that more, and we're coming together to realize that this isn't just, somebody else's issue, it's our whole issue.
When we talk about the smart young talent problem solvers of tomorrow, we have two of them with us today, Brian Facata and Julie Emsley. Thank you so much for joining us today.